My name's Alex Williams, I'm the head of animation at Escape Studios, and this is a very short video to talk about how to write a retrospective. So anyone watching this video who's a student at Escape Studios will know that at the end of many of our modules, in fact most of them, you need to write a retrospective, which is a retrospective log of the work that you've done, where you critique your own work, you compare it to industry standards, and you try to take an academic approach to the practical work that makes up the bulk of our classroom work at Escape Studios. So it's a time to think, a time to reflect, and above all, it's something that shouldn't be done in a hurry and shouldn't be rushed. You need to take your time over it and really think it through. Now, there are a number of things that many students trip over. So here is a short list of some of the most common mistakes when writing a retrospectives. So I've got my 10 rules for success. Rule number 1 is use our standard template. Now the template is not something you have to use. We created it because it helps students to identify the kinds of questions that you should be asking yourselves, and then gives you clues as to what those answers might be. So use the standard template, but be aware that you don't have to. Rule number 2 is spelling and grammar. This should be a really easy one, but I would say that 9 out of 10 retrospectives that I get still have problems with spelling and grammar, and there's really no reason for that. If you're working in Microsoft Word, you can see that Microsoft underlines in red all the typos, and will underline in green, I think, where there's a potential grammar problem. So the automatic software now helps you to a great degree to fix typos and spelling errors and grammatical errors. So really, there's no easier way to drop marks than with spelling and typos. Number 3 is avoid slang. People use slang all the time. You know, phrases like, I really wanted to nail the timing. There's just a much better way of saying that. I really wanted to get the timing right. Try to avoid slang, try to avoid street English. Remember, think of it as a piece of academic writing, and so write in a formal style. It doesn't have to be pompous, but it's not street English. Rule number 4: avoid really long sentences. This is a trap that lots of people fall into. They'll start a sentence and they'll just kind of keep going, and they keep going, and they keep going, and that's fine. But then you can go back over it and edit it and break it up into shorter paragraphs, so that each paragraph is about a thing, and then when you go on to the next thing that you want to talk about, you have a new paragraph. Otherwise you will confuse your audience and it makes it much harder to read. So avoid long sentences and long paragraphs. Rule number 5, use capital letters correctly. I suppose in a way this comes under spelling and grammar, but I see this all the time. People will identify a film, The Iron Giant, but they won't capitalize it, capital I, capital G. If you're talking about proper nouns, they need to be capitalized. First word of the sentence, capitalize it. So standard rules of spelling and grammar apply. Make sure you get the stuff right. Now, rule number 6, avoid contractions. It's generally better to say it is than it's. You can use them, but it's generally better not to. Rule number 7, very important, this one: avoid personal attacks. Nobody wants to read a retrospective where you are attacking your fellow students. Let's say it's a group project where you identify people who let you down. It's fine to identify weaknesses in your team and talk about how you overcame them, but try not to use this as a vehicle for ad hominem attacks on either students or staff. This is not the place. If you've got a complaint about a staff member, got a complaint about me or anyone else, take it to the staff student liaison committee, take it to the dean, whatever, but don't put it in your retrospectives. That's not the right place. Rule number 8, avoid trumpet blowing. Didn't I do well on this project? Try and avoid that. So what you want to do is, instead of saying, I did really well on this project, or my animation was amazing, you'd be surprised what people write. Bear in mind that we're going to be the judge of that ultimately, because we've got to grade your work. So, you can say that you exceeded your expectations, but always bear in mind that everything we do at Escape Studios, we're comparing to industry standards. So rather than compare your own work to your own standards, whatever they might be, because they might be quite low, compare it to industry standards. That's where we're trying to get to. That's where we're trying to get you to. So try and avoid saying how marvelous your work was. Rule number 9, reach a conclusion. It's always good to summarize the main points that you've made in your retrospective. So if you really learned some new stuff in this module or this group project or whatever it was, come to a conclusion, highlight the 2 or 3 or 4 things that you felt you learned the most, the key things that you took away from that module. And rule number 10, this is the most important: proofread the document. And by proofreading, I don't just mean skim it in Word or whatever you wrote it in. And this is my preferred method, is take the trouble to print it out. So actual old school printing on a piece of paper, double-sided if you like, one-sided, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can use the printers in the hallways at Escape Studios. And then get yourself a red biro and give it to somebody whose ability to write written English you respect. And that could be a family member, it could be one of the other students in class, it could be one of the tutors, it could be me, it could be anyone, but somebody who writes good written English. And then have them mark it up. And by mark it up, what I mean is they're going to take the document and they're going to take their red pen. This is not a red pen, this is a pencil, but pretend it's a red pen. And they're going to mark it up. They're going to circle or underline the stuff that doesn't work. They're going to write in corrections. They're going to highlight typos, and then they're going to give it back to you, the corrected document in red, and then you can go back into your Word document and make the changes. And that, I know it's an old-fashioned method, but still for me it is the best and most reliable method of picking up mistakes, to get somebody else to read it sitting on the page in print, and take a look at it and cast a second eye over it. So those are my top 10 tips for writing a retrospective. Follow those and you shouldn't be having any problems. And it's important to remember that many of our students, I won't say most, but many of our students do less well on the retrospectives than they do in the practical work. But it's important to remember the retrospectives typically are 25% of the value of the module. So if you write a nice retrospective, you will get a significantly higher overall grade.